Welcome to Hidden Wounds. I was brought up with the idea that a home holds memories, that laughter echoes in its corners, that secrets are absorbed by its walls, and that the floors know the difference between footsteps that return and those that are gone forever. If a house can truly remember, then this one will carry the memory of that bitter Sunday afternoon in February for the rest of its days. My name is Walter Adams, and I am 62 years old. I have come to understand that certain lessons in life can only be learned through consequences that leave a far deeper mark than any words ever could. I was seated at my dining room table, a mahogany piece that had been passed down from my own father, when my pregnant daughter-in-law, Megan, spoke the words that would irrevocably alter our lives. Her hand rested on the high curve of her 7-month belly in a gesture of ownership, while her other hand tapped an impatient rhythm on the very table I had paid for. "I don't want this old man here while I'm pregnant," she declared, without even granting me the courtesy of a direct look. His negative energy is bad for the baby. My son, Kevin, stood just behind her, a mere shadow of the self-assured man I had raised on my own after his mother's death. His shoulders were slumped in a posture of defeat, his gaze fixed on the hardwood floor as he braced himself to prioritize his wife's whims over his father's dignity. "Dad," he began, his voice barely a whisper, "you need to find somewhere else to live." The silence that descended upon the room was absolute. It was a silence filled with the weight of 23 years as a single father. It held the memory of countless nights spent working double shifts to finance his education. It contained the down payment for this very house, a gift I had given them to begin their married life. All of that sacrifice was now diminished to a single moment of casual cruelty, served up alongside the Sunday roast. I gave a single, deliberate nod, my face a mask of calm, despite the ice that was rapidly forming around my heart. "Then you'll want me out of here soon. I'll be gone by tonight." Megan blinked, taken aback. She had clearly anticipated a scene, tears, pleas, a dramatic outburst that would serve as gossip for her friends. What she received instead was the one thing a bully is never prepared for: the quiet compliance of a man who was already plotting their downfall. "Good," she managed to say, regaining her composure with a smile that looked as though she'd just eliminated a persistent pest. I excused myself from the table and made my way upstairs to pack my belongings. My life, as it turned out, could be condensed into fewer boxes than one might imagine. A meticulously chosen wardrobe of dark suits and fine coats, my father's watch, and my late wife's jewelry box. A leather briefcase filled with documents that Megan and Kevin had never taken the time to examine. Insurance policies, property deeds, trust agreements, and contracts containing clauses specifically written to shield a generous father from ungrateful children. I took only my personal effects, leaving everything else behind: the furniture I had purchased for them, the art I had carefully selected, the crystal glassware that had been wedding presents from my side of the family. I would let them savor the fantasy of ownership for a little while longer. As I waited on the front porch for my ride, I watched Megan through the window. She was arranging a bouquet of fresh flowers in a vase I had given her for Christmas. She moved through the rooms I had decorated with the air of a monarch surveying her domain, utterly oblivious to the fact that she was about to learn a harsh lesson on the distinction between possession and ownership. Once I was checked into a comfortable hotel room, I made a single phone call. It was to my godson, Leo Vance, a highly successful property manager whose first business loan I had personally financed 15 years prior. "Uncle Walter," he answered, using the affectionate title he'd called me since he was a boy, even though we shared no blood. "What can I do for you?" "It's time, son," I said, my tone leaving no room for doubt. There was a brief pause on his end as he absorbed the meaning of my words. Leo was fully aware of the Adams Heritage LLC, the legal entity I had set up when I helped Kevin and Megan acquire their home. He knew all about the lease-to-own contract they had carelessly signed without a second glance. And most critically, he knew about the clauses that would nullify their tenancy in the event of hostile conduct towards the beneficiary, which was me. "I'll be there Wednesday morning," he promised. 9 a.m. sharp. "Thank you, Leo. And bring a locksmith with you." After ending the call, I poured myself a glass of scotch and went over the legal documents one last time. Kevin and Megan were under the impression that they owned that house, an illusion I had permitted them to maintain. The deed had always been held by Adams Heritage LLC, a holding company created for the sole purpose of protecting my investment while giving the appearance of an independent transaction. They had signed a lease-to-own agreement, buried within pages of welcoming paperwork, which included the very breach clauses I had prayed I would never have to invoke. Disrespect towards the beneficiary terminates the option to purchase. Hostile conduct voids occupancy immediately. Utilities operate under a master service agreement that I control. For 2 years, I had observed Megan as she methodically excluded me from family events, rolled her eyes at my offers of assistance, and treated my generosity not as a gift, but as her entitlement. I had held my tongue and endured her behavior for Kevin's sake, clinging to the hope that she would eventually mature with age and responsibility. Today, she had called me an old man with negative energy and exiled me from the very home I had provided for them. Tomorrow, she would discover that some old men hold more power than she could possibly fathom. I slept soundly that night, comforted by the knowledge that in 36 hours, the inevitable consequences of their cruelty would arrive on their doorstep, dressed in a suit and carrying eviction papers. Some people learn to be respectful through kindness and patience. Others, it seems, require a more direct and forceful education. Tuesday morning arrived with a sense of clarity that only comes after making a decision that should have been made months ago. I awoke in my hotel suite, ordered a full breakfast from room service, and began the meticulous task of cataloging every single dollar I had poured into Kevin and Megan's comfortable existence. The final ledger was a sobering document. The down payment on the house, $85,000. Furniture and major appliances, $23,000. Wedding expenses I had covered after Megan's parents pleaded financial hardship, $31,000. Monthly financial gifts to assist with their mortgage, utilities, and general lifestyle expenses, roughly $2,800 a month for the last 2 years. The grand total was just over $200,000, a figure that represented far more than just money. It was a symbol of trust, of love, and of the naive hope that my generosity would one day be met with gratitude rather than disdain. I had raised Kevin alone after his mother died in a tragic car accident when he was only 12. There was no life insurance, no substantial savings, no safety net of any kind, except for my unwavering resolve to give my son every advantage I possibly could. I worked 60-hour weeks as a legal secretary, all while attending night school to earn my paralegal certification. Every promotion I received, every salary increase, every financial goal I achieved was driven by the desire to build a secure future for the two of us. When Kevin met Megan during his senior year of college, I had welcomed her into our lives with open arms. She was attractive, well-educated, and she seemed to make my son happy. When they announced their engagement, I offered to pay for the wedding because Megan's parents, a teacher and a mechanic, could not afford the lavish affair their daughter insisted upon. When they began looking for a house, I discreetly arranged the financing through Adams Heritage LLC, structuring it as a lease-to-own agreement that would grant them full ownership after 5 years of consistent payments and good standing. I wanted to give them the dignity of homeownership while simultaneously protecting my own interests from the legal entanglements that can arise from financial dealings within a family. The breach clauses had been my lawyer's suggestion, a safeguard I had hoped would remain forever dormant. Family dynamics can change, he had cautioned me. You need to protect yourself in case the relationship sours. I had brushed off his worries back then. Kevin was my son. Megan would surely learn to appreciate my support once she matured and settled into her role as a wife. How wrong I had been. The warning signs had started small. Megan would forget to include me in their dinner party invitations. There were passive-aggressive comments about my interfering when I offered to help with projects around the house. Subtle jabs about my age, my taste, my opinions, all delivered with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. I had chalked it all up to the stresses of a new marriage, pregnancy hormones, the normal growing pains of merging two families. I made excuses for her behavior and tried to compensate by being even more generous, believing that kindness would ultimately prevail. Yesterday's cruelty had shattered that illusion and forced me to confront the truth. Megan didn't dislike me in spite of my generosity. She disliked me because of it. My support made her feel inadequate, dependent, and lesser than the self-sufficient woman she desperately wanted to be. Instead of acknowledging her gratitude, she had chosen to resent me for providing the very things she could not provide for herself. And Kevin, the son for whom I had sacrificed everything, had chosen to enable her cruelty rather than stand up for the father who had given him the world. They wanted me gone. They were about to get their wish, along with the full measure of the independence they so desperately claimed to desire. I dedicated Tuesday afternoon to visiting the utility companies, the homeowners association office, and the property management firm. As the beneficial owner of the property through Adams Heritage LLC, I held the authority to make specific changes to their living situation. The conversations were direct and professional. I need to revoke the authorized users on the master utility account for 1,247 Maple Street. The HOA violations have been ignored for too long. Please issue formal citations for the visible trash receptacles, unauthorized signage, and noise complaints. The property management agreement needs to be activated immediately. Have Mr. Vance begin the inspection and compliance review process. By the end of the day, the foundations of their comfortable life had been quietly, legally, and permanently shaken. They wouldn't feel the tremors right away. Utility services aren't shut off in an instant. HOA fines take time to be processed, and property management firms operate on a standard business schedule. But the gears were turning, and once a machine of this nature is set in motion, it is exceedingly difficult to stop. I had dinner alone at the hotel restaurant and reviewed my schedule. Tomorrow would be the day of confrontation, the day their illusion of security would be shattered for good. In less than 24 hours, Kevin and Megan would learn that actions have consequences, that cruelty comes with a price, and that some doors, once they have been closed, can never be opened again. I ordered a second glass of scotch and raised it in a toast to my own reflection in the window, to boundaries, to consequences, and to the grim satisfaction of watching ungrateful people finally realize just how much they had taken for granted. Wednesday morning broke with a crisp winter air that seemed to make the world sharper and more defined. I rose early, dressed in my best navy suit and my late wife's pearls, which I kept as a memento, and prepared myself to witness the culmination of 2 years of careful legal planning. At 7:30 a.m., I called Leo to confirm the day's timeline. "Everything is in place, Uncle Walter," he reassured me. "Process server, locksmith, and a moving truck are all scheduled. The paperwork is airtight. They have no legal grounds to challenge the eviction. And the utilities? Master service agreement was terminated at midnight. They'll have basic services until Friday to collect their personal items. Then it's a complete disconnection. A wave of both satisfaction and sorrow washed over me. It never should have come to this. If Megan had demonstrated even a shred of basic respect, if Kevin had shown a modicum of loyalty to the father who had devoted his life to him, none of this would be happening. But they had sealed their fate the moment they labeled me a negative influence and cast me out. Now, they would have to face the fallout. At 8:45 a.m., I took a seat in the coffee shop directly across the street from the house, affording myself a clear view of the front door and driveway. I needed to see this unfold, not out of a sense of malice, but because sometimes you need to witness justice being served with your own eyes to truly believe it is real. At precisely 9:00 a.m., Leo's black sedan pulled up to the curb. It was followed by a white van with county process server printed on the side and a locksmith's truck. The coordination was, in its own way, a thing of beauty, a well-oiled legal machine, operating exactly as it was designed to, protecting property rights and enforcing contracts. Leo strode to the front door with the confident gait of a man who knows the law is firmly on his side. He looked sharp in his charcoal suit, carrying a leather briefcase that held the power to dismantle a person's entire world. He knocked 3 times firm, professional knocks that were unmistakably official. Through the coffee shop window, I watched Kevin open the door. He was in his pajamas and a bathrobe, his expression one of clear annoyance at the early morning disturbance. His face shifted rapidly as he processed the formal assembly on his doorstep. The process server with her official clipboard, the locksmith with his case of tools, and Leo with his unyielding, businesslike presence. I couldn't hear their conversation from my vantage point, but their body language told the entire story. Kevin's initial confusion gave way to alarm. Then Megan appeared at the door, one hand on her pregnant belly, her expression morphing from irritation to shock, and then to a dawning sense of panic. The process server stepped forward and began to read from her documents in the clear, measured tone that transforms ordinary moments into official legal proceedings. I knew every word of that notice by heart, because I had helped to write it. Due to a breach of covenants, including hostile conduct toward the beneficiary, your tenancy and option to purchase are hereby terminated. Surrender of the premises is required immediately. The locks will be changed within 24 hours. It was at that moment that Megan grabbed the doorframe for support, and her legs seemed to give out from under her. Even from across the street, I could see the dark stain spreading across her light-colored pants as her water broke right there on the front steps. The timing was remarkable. Not orchestrated, not manipulated, just the universe adding its own dramatic flair to the morning's events. Kevin started shouting. I could hear the sound of his voice, but not the words themselves. Megan was crying, doubled over in a combination of pain and shock. The process server continued her reading with professional dispassion while the locksmith calmly began to unpack his tools. And then Leo pointed to a document in his briefcase. It was the property deed, clearly showing Adams Heritage LLC as the legal owner, with Walter Adams as the beneficial party. I watched Kevin's face drain of all color as the full weight of the situation finally crashed down upon him. The house wasn't his. It had never been his. Every payment they had made was rent, not a mortgage payment. Every renovation they had dreamed of was for a property they did not own. Megan was having contractions on the steps of a house that was being repossessed as she was going into labor. I finished my coffee, left a generous tip for the server, and walked across the street. "You said you didn't want me here while you were pregnant," I said to Megan as I approached the chaotic scene. "I heard you." She looked up at me, her face a mask of tears and pain, a mixture of physical agony and dawning comprehension. "Walter, please." "I'm calling an ambulance." I said calmly, taking out my phone. That will be the extent of my involvement in this matter. While we awaited the paramedics, Kevin tried to force his way past Leo and into the house, as if simply being inside could somehow reverse what was happening. The process server smoothly moved to block his path, her clipboard becoming a formidable barrier backed by the full authority of the law. Sir, you no longer have legal access to this property. You may retrieve personal belongings under supervision, but you cannot enter without the property manager's permission. This is my house, Kevin screamed, his voice raw with desperation. Leo opened his briefcase and produced the deed. Owner of record, Adams Heritage, LLC. Beneficial owner, Walter Adams. You are tenants whose lease has been terminated for cause. The ambulance arrived with its cheerful, efficient blare, transforming our legal drama into a medical emergency. The paramedics gently loaded Megan onto a gurney while she clung to the doorframe, her eyes pleading with me. Please, she whispered. Please, Walter. I called the ambulance, I replied, my voice steady. That is my limit. As they wheeled her away, I noticed she was still wearing the sapphire earrings I had given her for Christmas. The same ones she had complained were not quite the style she had been hoping for. It seemed fitting that she would be wearing my gifts while being evicted from my property. The locksmith had already started his work on the front door lock. The sound was surprisingly quiet. A series of small, precise clicks that would forever prevent Kevin from casually walking into the home he had believed was his. Leo handed Kevin a single sheet of paper. You have 24 hours to remove your personal belongings. Personal items only, and only what you can carry in 2 supervised trips. We have a baby coming, Kevin said desperately, as if biology could somehow negate contract law. You have a notice to vacate, Leo replied, with the practiced patience of someone who has dealt with countless difficult tenants. I stood on the sidewalk and watched my son learn what it felt like to be powerless, to have no options, and to have no one to blame but himself for the choices that had brought him to this moment. By noon, the house was legally mine once more. By evening, a new tenant would be moving into the master bedroom where Kevin and Megan had planned to bring their newborn child home. Justice, I mused, has a timing all its own. Thursday brought the deep satisfaction of seeing well-laid plans executed with flawless precision. I stood in the foyer of what had recently been Kevin and Megan's home, breathing in the profound silence that follows the legal resolution of chaos. The moving company had arrived at first light, guided by a detailed inventory list I had provided. Every single piece of furniture I had ever purchased for them remained exactly where it was. The leather sectional sofa, the dining room set, the king-size bed that Megan had chosen with such an air of entitlement 2 years prior, all of it stayed. The only items that were removed were their personal effects: clothes, photographs, toiletries, and the few meager possessions they had brought into the marriage. The expensive crib remained. I had paid for it with my credit card after Megan posted on social media about manifesting abundance with the hashtag #blessed. The company's ledger, however, does not recognize social media posts as a valid form of payment. It operates on a system of receipts and invoices, and every one of those receipts bore my name. I walked from room to room, struck by how much emptier the house felt without the constant undercurrent of their drama. The kitchen, where Megan had complained about my interference when I offered to help with meal planning. The living room, where Kevin had consistently avoided my gaze while his wife systematically erased me from their lives. The master bedroom, where they had surely whispered about how to minimize my involvement in their marriage. It was all mine now, legally and unequivocally. Et cat, zero pay, M. My new tenant arrived. He carried 2 neat suitcases and possessed the kind of quiet competence that comes from years of working with people in crisis. "Mr. Adams, I'm Mateo Garcia, the NICU nurse you spoke with." He was precisely the kind of person I had hoped to find when I contacted the local hospital's Human Resources Department about providing housing for their night shift medical staff. He was in his mid-30s, professional, responsible, and completely uninterested in drama or personal complications. "Welcome, Mateo. Your room is upstairs, the master bedroom with the ensuite bathroom. You'll have full use of the kitchen and all common areas." He surveyed the beautifully furnished house with an expression of genuine appreciation, not greed. "Thank you. This is perfect. I work 3 12-hour shifts a week, mostly at night, so I'll be very quiet during the day." "That sounds ideal. You'll find the house is quite peaceful now." As he carried his bags upstairs, a profound sense of satisfaction settled deep within me. The room where Kevin had slept as a child, where he had brought his new wife to play house with my money, now belonged to someone who understood the value of hard work and mutual respect. That evening, my phone began to ring. Kevin had evidently discovered that his childhood home was now occupied by a stranger, and his panic was almost palpable, even through the distorted sound of a voicemail message. "Dad, please call me back. I don't understand what's happening. There's someone living in our bedroom. Megan's in the hospital, and we have nowhere to go. Please, I'm begging you." I listened to the message once, then archived it without a reply. Begging should have come before the banishment, not after the consequences had arrived. The second call came an hour later. "This is insane. That's my house. I grew up there. You can't just throw us out because Megan said something stupid when she was hormonal and pregnant. Call me back." Still, there was no acknowledgement of what had truly transpired. No apology for his own cowardice. No recognition of the cruel and unjust way I had been treated. Only anger that his actions had led to consequences. The third call came close to midnight. "Dad." His voice was broken now, drained by a day of discovering that the safety net he had always taken for granted had been irrevocably removed. "I know you're angry, but please, we need help. The baby might come early, and we don't have anywhere to take him home. I'll make Megan apologize. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Just please don't destroy our family." Our family. The family that had dismissed me as a negative influence. The family that had decided I was unwelcome in their presence, even as they continued to enjoy my financial support. I deleted the message. Then a call came from the hospital. A clerk was on the line, because bureaucracies move at their own pace, and old information lingers in the system. "Mr. Adams, you're listed as the emergency contact for Megan Vale. The baby may require extended monitoring. Should we update the father on the situation?" "You may send any updates to their legal counsel," I said calmly. "Please remove my name from all contact lists immediately." The woman on the other end paused, clearly perplexed by such an unusual request. "Sir, are you sure? This is about your grandchild." "I'm quite certain. Thank you." I hung up the phone and added another note to my legal file. All hospital communications to be handled through third parties. No direct contact with patients or family members. The baby would be fine. Hospitals are well equipped to handle complicated births, and Megan was young and healthy, despite her penchant for drama. But their assumption that a biological connection would override their atrocious behavior was just one more miscalculation in a long series of poor choices. I spent the rest of the evening updating my insurance policies, revising my will, and establishing a trust fund. This trust would provide for my grandchild's education and housing needs when he turned 25. The payments would be made directly to the institutions, never to the parents, and only on the condition that the child maintain no contact with me until that age. They had used their unborn child as a weapon to justify their cruelty. I was now ensuring that this child would have opportunities in spite of his parents' failings, while also making certain that those opportunities could never be manipulated or controlled by Kevin and Megan. As I prepared for bed, I could hear Mateo's quiet footsteps upstairs as he got ready for his night shift at the hospital. The house felt peaceful in a way it never had when it was filled with tension, resentment, and the voices of ungrateful people. Tomorrow would undoubtedly bring more phone calls, more desperate attempts to guilt me into reversing the natural consequences of their choices. But tonight, I slept well in my hotel bed, knowing that justice was not only served, but was now residing comfortably in the master bedroom of the house they had foolishly believed was theirs. Some lessons can only be learned through loss. Some people only come to appreciate what they had after it is gone forever. Kevin and Megan were about to receive a very thorough education in both of these concepts. Friday brought the kind of systematic dismantling that can only occur when years of ingrained financial dependence are suddenly and completely severed. I woke early and made a series of phone calls that would finalize the process of extracting myself from every single aspect of Kevin and Megan's comfortable life. I need to remove Kevin Vale and Megan Vale from my family phone plan, effective immediately. I'm canceling the auto insurance policy for the secondary drivers listed on my account. Please remove the additional cardholders from my credit cards and revoke their access to the family checking account. Each conversation was brief, professional, and definitive. The customer service representatives on the other end offered the appropriate level of sympathy for what they likely perceived as a standard family disagreement, suggesting solutions like temporary suspensions or cooling-off periods. "No, thank you," I replied to each well-intentioned offer. "This is a permanent change." The remarkable thing about financial interdependence is how utterly invisible it is until it vanishes. For 2 years, I had quietly shouldered hundreds of small, recurring expenses that made their lives significantly easier. The family phone plan that saved them $60 each month. The insurance discount that came with being on my policy. The credit card that served as a safety net for emergencies whenever their budget fell short. They had become accustomed to these benefits, in the same way one becomes accustomed to running water, completely oblivious to the complex infrastructure that makes such a convenience possible until the day the taps run dry. By noon, their phones would cease to function. By evening, their car insurance would have lapsed. By Monday, they would discover that the credit cards they had come to rely on for any unexpected expense were no longer valid. But the financial freeze was only just beginning. I spent the afternoon at my bank, closing the joint account I had established for emergencies and terminating the automatic monthly transfers that had been supplementing their income for the past 2 years. The regular deposits of $2,800, which had covered their mortgage shortfall, utility overages, and discretionary spending, would simply cease to exist, like a river abruptly dammed at its source. The financial advisor who assisted me in restructuring my accounts was the picture of professional discretion, but I could see the curiosity glinting in her eyes. "Are you sure you want to liquidate all the family trust provisions, Mr. Adams? These changes are quite difficult to reverse." "I'm completely certain," I said. "Please also remove the beneficiary designations for Kevin Vale and any future spouse or children." She nodded and jotted down notes in my file. "And the new beneficiaries for your estate?" I had given this matter considerable thought over the past 2 days. 50% to the Children's Hospital Foundation, 30% to the Legal Aid Society for Women, and 20% to Mateo Garcia, with a note stating that he provided excellent companionship and professional service during my final years. The advisor's eyebrow twitched upward at the last designation, but she remained silent. Mateo was unaware of his future inheritance, and he wouldn't be until after I was gone. But the young man who worked grueling night shifts to care for newborn babies was far more deserving of security than the adult children who had cast me out. My phone had been ringing incessantly since the previous evening. 17 missed calls from Kevin, 12 from unknown numbers that I suspected were Megan calling from the hospital, and 3 from numbers I didn't recognize, which I assumed were friends or family members attempting to mediate on their behalf. I listened to none of them. After 48 hours of complete silence from me, Kevin had apparently entered the bargaining stage of grief. His latest voicemail was particularly revealing. "Dad, I've talked to Megan, and she's really sorry about what she said. She was just stressed about the pregnancy and didn't really mean it. She wants to apologize to you in person as soon as she's out of the hospital. We can fix this. Please, just call me back so we can sort out this mess." There was still no acknowledgement that the mess was entirely of their own making. Still no comprehension that calling me a negative influence and banishing me from their lives carried consequences that went far beyond hurt feelings. Just a naive assumption that a hollow apology from Megan would magically restore their access to my resources. I deleted the message and added a new rule to my phone settings. Block all calls from Kevin Vale and Megan Vale. Route any attempts to contact me through my attorney's office. The next phase of their education was about to commence. Saturday morning began with a call from the storage facility, where Kevin and Megan kept their seasonal decorations and excess furniture. The monthly payment for the unit was 3 months overdue. My automatic credit card payment, another invisible subsidy they had completely forgotten about, had been canceled along with their account access. "Sir, we've been trying to reach the renters, but their phone numbers are no longer in service. The unit is scheduled for public auction on Monday if the outstanding balance isn't settled. I am no longer responsible for that account," I stated calmly. "You'll need to resolve the matter with the renters directly." "But sir, your credit card has been covering the payments." "Not anymore." I hung up the phone and made a mental note to attend the public auction. Some of the items in that storage unit were family heirlooms that I had passed down to them. My late wife's china set, my father's antique dresser, wedding gifts I had personally selected and purchased for them. There would be a certain grim satisfaction in buying back my own generosity at a fraction of the original cost. By Sunday, the full, devastating scope of their situation was becoming undeniably clear to them. Kevin left a series of increasingly frantic messages as each of their support systems systematically failed. No phone service, no car insurance, no credit cards, no family financial backing, no access to their storage unit, and no place to bring their newborn baby home. His final voicemail of the weekend was a masterpiece of panic and self-pity. "Dad, I don't understand how you can do this to us. We're your family. Megan made a mistake, but she's learned her lesson. She's scared and alone in the hospital, and I'm sleeping in my car because we can't afford a hotel. Your grandchild is going to be born into this chaos, all because you're punishing us for one bad day. Please, I'm begging you. Just give us a chance to make this right." I saved that message, not out of any sense of sentimentality, but because it perfectly encapsulated the precise moment when a lifetime of entitlement finally collided with harsh reality. They believed that family meant unconditional access to my resources, regardless of their behavior. I was teaching them that family meant mutual respect, gratitude, and the unwavering understanding that cruelty has consequences. Their lesson was only just beginning. Monday morning arrived with a kind of crisp satisfaction that comes from watching natural consequences play out exactly as you knew they would. I dressed in my finest black suit and the pearl cufflinks my wife had given me, then drove to the storage facility auction with the keen anticipation of someone about to reclaim stolen property. The auctioneer was a weathered man who had clearly witnessed thousands of families' possessions being sold off to strangers, and he approached each unit with a practiced, professional detachment. Unit 247, the abandoned storage space of Kevin and Megan, was third on the morning schedule. I stood at the back of the small crowd and watched as he rolled up the corrugated metal door, revealing the contents of their former life. There were the Christmas decorations I had bought, the furniture they had inherited from my side of the family, the wedding gifts I had given them, and boxes filled with photographs documenting happier times when I was still a welcome part of their lives. "What am I bid for the entire contents?" the auctioneer called out. A few casual bidders glanced over the items. To a stranger, there was nothing of particular value, just the accumulated possessions of a young couple who had lived well beyond their means until reality finally caught up with them. I waited until the bidding had stalled at a mere 75. Then I raised my hand. 100. The other bidders looked at me with curiosity. An elegantly dressed older man clearly had no practical use for second-hand furniture and holiday decorations. But they didn't counter my bid, and the unit became mine for less than I had originally paid for any single item inside it. "Cash sale. Immediate pickup," the auctioneer announced. I handed him 5 20 bills and in return received a receipt that officially granted me ownership of items that, morally, had always belonged to me anyway. Later that afternoon, I arranged for everything to be donated to a local women's shelter, keeping only the family photographs. Those went directly into a fire pit behind my hotel, where I watched years of carefully documented family memories turn to ash and smoke. The photographs from Kevin's childhood, the wedding pictures where I had stood smiling proudly beside the happy couple, the baby shower photos where I was surrounded by gifts I had purchased, all of it was reduced to carbon and regret. As the final images curled and blackened in the flames, my phone rang. Kevin had somehow managed to get access to a working phone and was calling from what sounded like a crowded, echoing room. "Dad, someone bought our storage unit at auction. All of our Christmas stuff is gone. The baby furniture, everything. How could you let this happen?" I didn't bother to remind him that I had been paying for that storage unit without his knowledge for years, or that he could have easily prevented the auction by simply taking responsibility for his own expenses. Instead, I said simply, "I'm not responsible for your belongings, but some of that stuff was yours originally. Family heirlooms, things from Grandpa's house. You gave them to us." "Yes," I agreed. "I gave them to people whom I believed appreciated my generosity. Clearly, I was mistaken about their character." The line went silent for a long moment. When Kevin spoke again, his voice was small and broken. "Dad, please, I know we hurt you, but Megan is getting discharged from the hospital tomorrow, and we literally have nowhere to go. The baby is healthy, but we can't take him to a homeless shelter. I'm begging you to help us." "You have somewhere to go," I replied calmly. "You can go anywhere you like. You simply can't go there with my money, in my car, using my credit, or living in my house." He wanted independence from the old man. "Congratulations, you've achieved it." I ended the call and blocked his new number. That evening, a letter was delivered to my hotel by courier. The envelope was made of expensive stationery, adorned with tiny gold flowers, clearly a purchase from a time when Megan still had access to discretionary funds. Inside, her handwriting was shakier than usual, likely a result of exhaustion and postpartum hormones. "Dear Walter," it began, "I know I said terrible things to you, and I am deeply sorry. I was stressed about the pregnancy and worried about being a good mother, and I took it all out on you unfairly. You have been nothing but generous and kind to Kevin and me, and I should have appreciated your support instead of resenting it. Kevin told me about the house, and I understand why you're angry. We should have read the papers more carefully. We should have treated you better. I should have thanked you every single day instead of complaining about your help. Please don't punish our innocent baby for my mistakes. I know I called you terrible names, but I was wrong. You're not a negative influence. You're the man who made our lives possible, and I was too proud to admit it. If you could find it in your heart to forgive me, I promise things will be different. I'll be respectful, grateful, and welcoming. I'll make sure you know how much we appreciate everything you've done for us. I'm scared, Walter. We have a newborn baby and nowhere to go. Kevin is trying to be strong, but I can see how desperate he is. Please don't let your grandchild suffer because of my stupidity. I'm begging you for mercy. Love, Megan. I read the letter twice, taking note of the carefully chosen phrases and the manipulative appeals to emotion. The apology centered on her stress and fear rather than acknowledging the fundamental disrespect she had shown me. The promise to change her behavior came only after the consequences had already arrived. The final plea used the baby as leverage, just as I had anticipated. The most telling part was her closing, "Love, Megan." After 2 years of barely tolerating my presence, she was suddenly professing affection now that she desperately needed something from me. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in a file I had labeled, "Too little, too late." Some apologies are genuine expressions of remorse that deserve careful consideration. Others are merely strategic documents designed to regain access to resources. Experience had taught me how to tell the difference. This one was filed squarely under the second category. December brought news, delivered through the intricate network of mutual acquaintances that still tenuously connected me to my former family's increasingly desperate circumstances. Mrs. W.W.A.W. Gable, who lived 3 houses down from the property that once belonged to Kevin and Megan, called to ask if I was aware of a disturbing incident that had taken place the previous evening. "Your son was trying to break into the house," she informed me, her voice heavy with concern. "Around midnight, the motion, activated lights came on and scared him away. But the police were called. I thought you should know." I thanked her for the information, feeling a profound sadness that Kevin had sunk so low. The boy I had raised had his flaws, but he had never been a criminal. Desperation, it seemed, had the power to transform a person into someone they never intended to be. The next call came from Leo. "Uncle Walter, I have to file a formal incident report. Kevin tried to pry open a kitchen window last night. The security system captured everything on camera. Do you want to press charges?" I considered the question carefully. Pressing charges would saddle Kevin with a criminal record, making it even more difficult for him to find employment or secure housing. Not pressing charges might embolden him to try again. File for a restraining order, I decided. A 100-yard perimeter around the property. If he violates that, then we'll discuss criminal charges. Are you sure? The video is pretty clear evidence of attempted breaking and entering. I'm sure, I said. A restraining order will serve as a more effective deterrent than jail time in this case. That afternoon, I received a call from Megan's mother, Mrs. Albright, a woman I had met a total of 3 times during the 2 years Kevin and Megan had been married. "Walter, I know this isn't my place, but I'm worried about Megan and the baby. They're staying in an extended stay motel, and the conditions are simply not suitable for a newborn. She made a mistake. But surely the punishment has gone on long enough." "Mrs. Albright," I replied gently, "I did not create their housing situation. I simply stopped financing it. But you could help them get back on their feet. You have the resources. And they've learned their lesson, have they? I countered. Because last night, Kevin attempted to break into my property rather than seeking legitimate employment or housing assistance. There was a long, stunned pause on the other end of the line. It was clear that Megan's family was not aware of just how far Kevin had fallen in his desperation. I didn't know about that, Mrs. Albright said quietly. There's quite a lot you don't know about your daughter's situation, I replied, including the fact that she called me a negative influence and demanded that I leave their lives entirely. I am simply honoring her request. After she hung up, it dawned on me that Megan had been carefully curating the narrative she shared with her family, painting herself as the victim of my unreasonable anger, rather than admitting the role her own cruelty had played in creating their dire circumstances. The truth, however, has a way of eventually coming to light, no matter how meticulously one tries to manage it. 2 weeks before Christmas, I learned that Kevin had found a job, a night security position at a warehouse that paid minimum wage and offered no benefits. The job barely covered their motel expenses, leaving nothing for a permanent housing solution, reliable transportation, or the ever-growing needs of their infant son. According to Mrs. Gable, who seemed to have an intelligence network that spanned the entire neighborhood, Megan was struggling with postpartum depression, a condition exacerbated by their housing instability. The baby was healthy but colicky, crying frequently in the thin-walled motel room and disturbing the other guests. She looks absolutely exhausted, Mrs. Gable reported during one of her regular update calls. Pushing a stroller to the laundromat every other day, carrying a diaper bag, and looking like she hasn't slept in weeks. It's really quite sad. I felt a brief flicker of sympathy, but not a shred of regret. Megan was experiencing the natural consequences of her choices, not some arbitrary punishment I had inflicted upon her. She had demanded independence from my interference, and independence was precisely what she had received. On December 20th, Kevin made one final, desperate attempt to reach me. Instead of calling, he came to my hotel lobby and waited for 6 hours until I returned from a shopping trip. The hotel's security had offered to remove him, but I had instructed them to let him stay as long as he remained peaceful. He looked terrible, thin, unshaven, and wearing clothes that hadn't seen a proper cleaning in days. The confident young man I had raised had been replaced by someone who radiated an aura of defeat and desperation. "Dad," he said as I approached the elevator, "I need 5 minutes, please." I looked at him for a long moment, noting the dark circles under his eyes and the slight tremor in his hands that suggested too much caffeine and far too little sleep. 5 minutes, I agreed. We sat in the hotel lobby's seating area, surrounded by festive holiday decorations that seemed to cruelly mock their situation. James took a shaky breath and began what sounded like a rehearsed speech. "I know what Megan said was unforgivable. I know I should have defended you. I know we took your generosity for granted and treated you badly. I'm not asking you to forgive us. I'm asking you to help our son. He didn't choose his parents, and he doesn't deserve to suffer because of our mistakes." It was the first time he had acknowledged his own part in what had happened, rather than blaming it all on Megan's pregnancy hormones or my supposed overreaction. "Kevin," I said gently, "you are 28 years old. You have a college degree, work experience, and every advantage I could possibly provide for you during your childhood. If you can't create a stable life for your family with those resources, then more money from me isn't going to solve the underlying problem. But we can't afford a deposit on an apartment. We can't get approved for a lease with our credit damaged and no rental history. We're stuck in this cycle where we can't get ahead because we don't have enough to even start over." Then perhaps you should have considered those consequences before you cast out the very person who provided your financial stability. He flinched, as if I had physically slapped him. You're really never going to help us again, are you? I am going to help your son, I said calmly. When he turns 25, there will be a trust fund available for his education and housing. Payments will be made directly to the institutions, never to his parents. He will have opportunities despite your choices, not because of them. 25 years? Kevin's voice cracked. You're willing to let us struggle for 25 years? I am willing to let you experience the independence you demanded, I said. Congratulations, Kevin. You are finally free of the old man's interference. I stood up and walked to the elevator, leaving him sitting there amidst the twinkling lights and gold ribbons that decorated someone else's happy holiday season. Some bridges, once they have been burned, cannot be rebuilt with apologies or desperation. Some lessons can only be learned through years of facing the natural consequences of one's actions. Kevin and Megan had wanted me out of their lives. They had achieved their goal more completely than they had ever imagined possible. January brought a bitterly cold winter, and the news that Kevin and Megan had finally secured more stable housing, a subsidized apartment in a complex located 40 minutes outside the city center. The unit was small, and the neighborhood was rough, but it was a legal and safe environment for their baby. According to my sources, Kevin had been promoted to a day-shift supervisor position at the warehouse, a role that came with a modest raise and basic health insurance. Megan had found part-time work at a call center, scheduling her hours around Kevin's shifts so that one of them could always be at home with the baby. They were surviving just barely, but surviving nonetheless. I felt no satisfaction in their struggle, but I also felt no regret. They were finally learning the skills they should have developed years ago: budgeting, prioritizing, and problem-solving without a financial safety net to catch them when they fell. The apartment they had found was smaller than the master bathroom of the house they had lost. But it was theirs in a way the previous house had never been. They were paying their own rent, managing their own expenses, and making their own decisions about how to allocate their limited resources. In many ways, it was exactly what they had claimed to want when they had resented my interference in their lives. My own situation had stabilized beautifully. I had purchased an elegant townhouse in the historic district, close enough to my former neighborhood to maintain old connections, but far enough away to avoid any accidental encounters with my former family. Mateo had become more than just a tenant. He was the kind of thoughtful, appreciative companion I had once hoped to find in a daughter-in-law. He would leave thank-you notes when I placed fresh flowers in the common areas. He offered to cook dinner when his demanding schedule allowed. He treated our shared living arrangement as a privilege, not an entitlement. "Mr. Adams," he said one evening as we shared tea in the garden, "I hope you know how grateful I am for this arrangement. The peace and quiet here makes it possible for me to do my job well, which in turn helps me save families who are going through a medical crisis. And your presence makes this house feel like a home again," I replied honestly. "It's a mutually beneficial arrangement." He smiled and returned to his medical journals. There was no drama, no manipulation, no demands for additional support, just two adults who understood how to coexist with mutual respect and appreciation. In February, I learned that Megan had suffered a setback with her postpartum depression, requiring a brief hospitalization that had disrupted their fragile stability. Kevin had been forced to take unpaid leave from his job to care for the baby, setting them back financially, just as they had started to gain some momentum. The information came, as usual, through Mrs. Gable, who seemed to have developed a neighborhood intelligence network that could rival any government agency. "I heard from Megan's mother that she's doing better now," Mrs. Gable reported. "But the medical bills and the lost wages really hurt them. They're behind on their rent again." I made the appropriate sympathetic noises, while privately noting that this was exactly the kind of crisis that, in the past, would have prompted a panicked call to me for emergency funding. Now, they would have to solve the problem themselves or accept the consequences of their inability to do so. The baby, according to all reports, was healthy and developing normally. I had established protocols to receive updates about his welfare through third parties, ensuring his safety without creating opportunities for his parents to manipulate my concern into financial support. In March, Kevin made an unexpected appearance at my office building, waiting in the lobby until I had finished a meeting with my financial advisor. He looked better than he had during our last encounter cleaner, more composed, though still carrying the worn-down look of someone living paycheck to paycheck. "I'm not here to ask for money," he said as soon as he saw me, clearly anticipating my first assumption. I waited for him to continue. "I wanted you to know that we're doing okay. Not great, but okay. Megan's getting better. The baby's healthy. I got another promotion at work. We're making it on our own." "I'm glad to hear it," I said, and I genuinely meant it. "I also wanted to tell you that I understand now why you did what you did. We took everything you gave us and never once said thank you. We treated you like you owed us your support instead of recognizing it as the gift it was. We were selfish and ungrateful, and you had every right to cut us off." It was the most mature statement I had heard from him in years. "Understanding is the first step toward growth," I replied carefully. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he continued. "I know that's not possible, but I wanted you to know that we're learning to stand on our own 2 feet, and maybe that's what we needed all along." I studied his face, searching for any sign of manipulation or a hidden agenda. What I saw instead was exhaustion, humility, and the kind of hard-won wisdom that can only come from genuine struggle. "How is your son?" I asked. Kevin's face lit up despite his obvious weariness. "He's amazing. Walking now. Getting into everything. He laughs when I come home from work like he's genuinely happy to see me. Being his father it's the best thing I've ever done." For a fleeting moment, I felt the sharp, aching pain of everything I had lost alongside everything I had gained. A grandchild I would never hold. Milestones I would never witness. The family connection that had been severed by cruelty and pride. But the moment passed, replaced by the steel-hard certainty that some choices cannot be unmade, some words cannot be unsaid, and some relationships simply cannot survive certain betrayals. "I'm glad parenthood suits you," I said simply. He nodded, understanding that this was as close to warmth as our relationship would ever get again. "I should go. Megan's waiting in the car with the baby, and parking is expensive here." After he left, I sat in my office for a long time, watching the city bustle below my window and contemplating the strange mathematics of family love, how it can be both infinite and finite at the same time, unconditional until it suddenly isn't, strong enough to survive almost anything except for the one thing that finally breaks it. Kevin and Megan were learning to survive without me. Good for them. I was learning to thrive without them. Even better for me. April brought an unexpected crisis that would test the very boundaries I had so carefully established, and the resolve I had painstakingly built over months of maintaining my distance. The call came at 3:17 a.m. from a number I didn't recognize, always a harbinger of trouble in the modern world. "Mr. Adams, this is Dr. Shaw from Children's Hospital. I'm calling about your grandson, Ethan Vale. He's been admitted with severe pneumonia, and his condition is critical." My heart seized in my chest. Despite everything that had transpired between his parents and me, the baby was innocent. The carefully constructed distance I had maintained suddenly felt like a treacherous chasm that might cost an innocent life. "How critical?" I asked, already reaching for my clothes. "We're not sure yet. He's only 14 months old, and his immune system is still developing. We're doing everything we can, but you should know that his parents listed you as the emergency contact for medical decisions if they become incapacitated." "Are they incapacitated?" "No, but they're very young and very scared. They specifically asked if we could reach you." I arrived at the hospital 20 minutes later, still in my pajamas, with a coat hastily thrown over them. The pediatric ICU was a world of hushed voices and the steady, rhythmic beeping of machines, a place where tiny patients fought battles they should never have had to face. I found Kevin and Megan in the family waiting area. They looked exactly like what they were: terrified young parents confronting a crisis far beyond their control or experience. Megan was crying silently into her hands, clutching a small teddy bear. Kevin was pacing back and forth, his hair disheveled and his hands shaking uncontrollably. They looked up as I entered the room, and for a single, surreal moment, all the anger, the hurt, and the pride simply melted away. There was only a grandfather and two parents, united by a shared fear for a child's life. "Walter," Megan whispered, and for the first time I heard genuine gratitude in her voice. Not manipulation, not a calculated plea, just the raw relief of someone who sees that a person with experience and resources has arrived to help shoulder their impossible burden. "Tell me what happened," I said, sitting down beside them. Through tears and exhaustion, Kevin explained. Ethan had developed what seemed like a simple cold 3 days earlier. By yesterday evening, he was struggling to breathe. They had rushed him to the emergency room, where doctors discovered that the infection had progressed to severe pneumonia, requiring immediate intensive care. "They say the next 48 hours will tell us whether he'll be okay," Megan said, her voice breaking on the last word. I looked at these two young people who had wounded me so deeply, and I saw only parents drowning in a sea of fear. Whatever lingering anger I still harbored suddenly seemed petty and insignificant in the face of a baby's fight for his life. "What can I do?" I asked simply. The next 2 days blurred together in a haze of medical consultations, insurance paperwork, and the strange, unexpected intimacy that comes from sharing a crisis with people you love. Despite everything that has gone wrong between you, I used my contacts to ensure that Ethan received a consultation from the city's top pediatric pulmonologist. I handled the insurance complications that arose when his required treatments exceeded their policy's coverage limits. I arranged for meal deliveries so that Kevin and Megan could remain at the hospital without having to worry about their own basic needs. Most importantly, I simply sat with them during the long, agonizing hours when there was nothing to do but wait and worry and hope. On the second night, as Ethan's condition finally began to stabilize, Megan approached me in the hospital cafeteria, where I was nursing my 4th cup of coffee. "Walter," she said quietly, "I know this doesn't change anything between us, but thank you. You didn't have to help, especially after everything we put you through." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something I had never seen before: genuine humility. Not the strategic, self-serving apology she had offered when she wanted something, but the raw, unfiltered honesty of someone who had been stripped down to their essential humanity by fear and exhaustion. "He's my grandson," I said simply. "That doesn't require thanks." "It does, though. We treated you horribly, and you still came when we needed you. That's more grace than we deserved." She was right, and we both knew it. "Megan," I said carefully, "I'm glad Ethan is going to be okay, but this crisis doesn't erase what happened between us. I can care about his welfare, without resuming a relationship that was harmful to all of us. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. I just wanted you to know that I finally see what we lost when we pushed you away. You're not a negative influence. You're a man who loved us enough to let us face the consequences we needed to face, even when it hurt you too. It was the first apology that sounded like genuine remorse rather than a strategic manipulation. Ethan made a full recovery over the following week. His young immune system, given the expert support it needed, fought off the infection and returned him to the healthy, energetic toddler he had been before the illness. I visited him twice more in the hospital, not to reconcile with his parents, but to satisfy myself that he was truly well. He was a beautiful child. Kevin's eyes, Megan's smile, and a personality that was entirely his own. Watching him play with his toys while his parents hovered anxiously nearby, I felt the bittersweet ache of loving someone I could never fully know. On the day of his discharge, I left an envelope with the hospital's financial office. Inside was a check for the remaining balance on their medical bills. This was not a gesture of reconciliation, but a practical matter. Children should not have to suffer the financial consequences of necessary medical care. The envelope also included a note. For Ethan's medical care only, this does not change the boundaries we have established. I did not say goodbye to Kevin and Megan. There seemed to be no point in creating a moment that might be misinterpreted as a softening of my position or an offer of forgiveness. Instead, I simply left the hospital and drove home to my peaceful townhouse, where Mateo was waiting with a cup of tea and the kind of quiet companionship I had come to value above all other relationships. "How is your grandson?" he asked gently. "He's going to be fine," I replied, "and so am I." That night, I updated my will to include a provision for Ethan's medical expenses, should he ever face another health crisis. The money would be paid directly to the healthcare providers, never to his parents, ensuring that his welfare was protected regardless of their financial situation. I could love him from a distance. I could ensure his needs were met, but I could not, and would not, allow my concern for his well-being to be used as leverage to restore a relationship that had been fundamentally damaged by cruelty and betrayal. Some boundaries exist not because love has died, but because love itself requires protection from those who would exploit it. 1 year later, I stood in the garden of my townhouse on a perfect spring morning, watching Mateo tend to the flowers we had planted together. The house had become everything I had hoped for: peaceful, elegant, and filled with an atmosphere of mutual respect and genuine appreciation. My phone sat silent on the patio table. There were no desperate calls from former family members, no crises to manage, no manipulation disguised as an emergency. There was only the quiet satisfaction of a life built on my own terms, shared with people who understood the value of boundaries and gratitude. Isabella looked up from her work and smiled. "The roses are going to be spectacular this year. Thank you for letting me experiment with the garden design. Thank you for making this house feel like a home," I replied, meaning every word. He was everything I had hoped to find in a companion: thoughtful, independent, appreciative, without being servile. Our relationship was built on mutual benefit rather than one-sided giving, and it flourished in ways that family relationships often do not, because there were no underlying assumptions of entitlement or unconditional support. Through my network of neighborhood connections, I received occasional updates on Kevin and Megan's progress. They had moved to a better apartment in a safer neighborhood. Kevin had been promoted again and was taking night classes toward a business degree. Megan had found steady employment at a medical office, a job that utilized her organizational skills and provided good benefits. Ethan, now 2.5, was reportedly healthy, happy, and developing normally. They had enrolled him in a quality daycare program, saved up enough money for a reliable used car, and had begun to build the kind of stable, independent life they should have been working toward years earlier. Most importantly, they had stopped asking for help from others and had started solving their own problems. The crisis of Ethan's illness had apparently been a turning point, teaching them that they were more capable than they had ever believed back when they had unlimited access to my resources. I felt a sense of satisfaction, rather than vindication, at their progress. My goal had never been to destroy them, but to force them to stand on their own 2 feet and develop the character that a life of unlimited financial support had prevented them from building. They were becoming the adults I had always hoped they could be. They were just doing it without me in their lives. In June, I received an unexpected piece of mail, a graduation announcement. Kevin had completed his business degree with honors. The card included a photo of him in his cap and gown, holding Ethan with Megan beaming beside them. Inside, someone had written in careful handwriting, "We wanted you to know we're proud of what we've built together." There was no return address, no request for a response, no hidden agenda, just information shared, because they thought I might want to know that they had achieved something significant on their own. I placed the announcement in my desk drawer, not as a keepsake, but as a period at the end of a very long and complicated sentence. That evening, I hosted a dinner party for Matteo and several of his colleagues from the hospital. We ate well, laughed easily, and enjoyed the kind of uncomplicated fellowship that comes from people who know how to appreciate good things without demanding more than what is offered. As my guests were preparing to leave, Dr. Ramsey, the head of the NICU where Matteo worked, mentioned something that caught my attention. "Matteo tells me you've been incredibly generous with the hospital's family support fund. The contributions you've made have helped dozens of families during medical crises." I glanced at Matteo, who looked slightly embarrassed by the recognition. "It seemed like a good use of resources," I said simply. "Well, it's made a real difference. Families dealing with premature births often have financial stress that makes the medical stress even worse. Your support has helped them focus on their babies instead of worrying about expenses they can't control." After everyone had left, Matteo and I sat in the garden with our final glass of wine. "You didn't have to mention my contributions to Dr. Ramsey," I said. "I didn't tell him they came from you specifically," he replied. "But he noticed that our family support fund has grown significantly since I moved in here, and he wanted to make sure you knew how much it's appreciated." I nodded in understanding. The money I had once spent supporting Kevin and Megan's lifestyle was now helping families who truly needed assistance during a genuine crisis. It felt like a much better use of resources that had previously been taken for granted. "Matteo," I said carefully, "you know you are in my will, don't you?" He looked surprised and slightly uncomfortable. "Mr. Adams, I hope you know I'm not here because of any expectations about an inheritance. I know exactly why you're here," I said. "And that is precisely why you deserve to be remembered in my estate plans. You have given me something I didn't know I needed. A peaceful home with someone who understands that kindness should not be confused with unlimited access to resources." As we prepared for bed, I took one final walk through the house, noting how profoundly different it felt from the chaotic, entitled atmosphere that had surrounded Kevin and Megan during their marriage. This house remembered laughter without drama, conversations without manipulation, and gratitude without any strings attached. It remembered what family relationships could be when they were built on a foundation of mutual respect rather than financial dependence. In my study, I opened the drawer containing Kevin's graduation announcement and read it one more time. They had wanted me to know they were proud of what they had built together. Good for them. I was proud of what I had built without them. Some stories end with tearful reconciliations and families happily reunited. Others end with the quiet satisfaction of knowing that everyone found the life they actually needed, even if it wasn't the life they had originally wanted. I had wanted grandchildren I could spoil, holiday gatherings filled with laughter, and the warm satisfaction of a family that appreciated my sacrifices. Instead, I had gotten something better: peace, respect, and the knowledge that I was strong enough to choose dignity over dysfunction. Kevin and Megan had wanted financial support without accountability, my influence without their gratitude, and independence without any consequences. They had gotten exactly what they had asked for, along with the personal growth that came from finally learning to stand on their own 2 feet. Ethan would grow up with parents who had learned how to be responsible, self-sufficient adults. When he turned 25, he would have access to educational and housing support that would give him opportunities his parents had not been able to provide for themselves. Most importantly, he would have examples of both failure and recovery, showing him that people can change if they are willing to do the hard work of growth. The house remembered everything: the cruelty that had ended one chapter of my life and the wisdom that had begun another. I had been called a negative influence and cast out of a family I had built and supported for decades. In response, I had learned to be exactly the kind of man they should have feared. One who understood that the most powerful magic isn't found in curses or revenge, but in simply allowing people to experience the natural, unvarnished consequences of their own choices. They taught me how to end relationships that had become toxic. I taught them how to build lives without depending on people they did not respect. We were all better for the lesson, even if we would never share another moment of acknowledgement about what we had learned. The old man was content in his quiet home, surrounded by people who understood that kindness works best when it is appreciated rather than demanded. And somewhere across town, a young family was learning that the most powerful spell of all is taking responsibility for your own happiness.